Another crisis that has been going on in our country from the beginning of time is one where we're talking about racial injustice. And one of my favorite organizations within the city of Detroit, they're doing such important work. Focus Hope. Uh, for those that may not know, it actually started out of the 1967 civil unrest in the city of Detroit. And its aim is to try to bring us together to close the divide of racial and economic um, uh, injustice. But here we are all this time later. And the work is still going on. To talk a little bit more, we are honored to bring in the CEO, Portia Roberson. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Ronnie. I appreciate it this morning. And you are absolutely right on two fronts. One, I heard your last interview, and I love toyology, and it's fun for even those of us who don't have children of our own. I try to pretend it's for my nieces, but it's a little bit for me. But you are absolutely right about not only Focus Hope being around for 53 years now, we just started our 53rd year, and both the greatness of being around for a long time and being able to serve our community, but also sort of the challenge of the fact that some of the issues that we were started because of are still there today.
And I wonder with that, Portia, are you hopeful? Knowing that it feels like we keep repeating the same cycle as a nation, as a state, as a country. Are you hopeful? Can we get past this?
You know, it's difficult. I mean, there have definitely been some days. I know that after the murder of George Floyd, I certainly felt a little bit like I wrote a letter to our staff and I talked about the fact that leading Focus Hope at this moment was so very, telling to me because we seem to be back in sort of that same moment, right? But at the same time, I see throughout this last year, especially, I see people coming together in ways that I had never, I'm blown away by. So there are days when I'm a little less hopeful, but overall, I would say that the I guess support of the community, the coming together of people through this pandemic, through all of this, what's going on in this country does give me hope again.
And it really makes you wonder because we know now more than ever that my breath impacts your breath and the person
Absolutely.
of our neighbor. But yet here we are, and it feels like as a nation, we're more divided than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that political divide grows and, people want to, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, stand their ground on the issues that they believe in. I think, there have been moments throughout this past year where we have recognized our common humanity. And I mean, I think at the core, that's what we have to remember that, as I go, my neighbor goes, right? And so until we really accept the fact that one of us doesn't rise, if all of us don't rise, that we're not going to get ahead. I often say, particularly because Focus Hope is a race or is an organization started out of sort of harmonizing or bringing back together a divide between races. I think it's evolved a little bit. I think we're talking about a class divide as much as we're talking about a race divide now. And I really, really, I look around and I say to folks all the time, like, if we recognize that poor people in the Appalachian Mountains have a lot in common with poor people in urban cities like Detroit, if they really recognize the commonality between them, we could shake this whole thing up a bit.
I will say I grew up one of 9 kids. I'm the first in my family to go to college. We're the youngest. I have a twin sister. And then neither one of my parents have a high school education. And it really is like you learn poor is poor.
Poor is poor. Right.
And how do you how do you change and break that cycle? And a lot of it does come through in mentorships and programs such as those that are offered through your organization.
Well, it's interesting because, again, when you look at it from through a racial lens, I knew of Focus Hope growing up, but, I was very fortunate. Both of my parents, college degrees, graduate degrees. My father who recently passed away, was a judge. And so I never needed the services of Focus Help, but I knew where Focus Help was and I knew what it was all about. And so it's not about, we all need help from our neighbors from time to time. I want to make sure that people know when they come to Focus Help that we've all been there, or but for the grace of God could be there, right? And so we certainly saw that in this past year as it relates to COVID, because people who had never needed the services of an organization like Focus Hope needed them for the first time.
And we're speaking with Portia Roberson. She's the CEO for Focus Hope. And with that, how are you and your teammates doing throughout this pandemic? And how are you able to service people when you're about connecting people?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, I heard your lead in where you talked about we thought it was going to be 2 weeks. And that's certainly what we thought at Focus Help. I thought as the CEO, I thought we'll be out for 2 weeks, maybe a month. In fact, when we first started talking about a shutdown, I was like, what is a country shut? That's not even possible. Like, what do you mean the shutdown of the country? It was incomprehensible to most of us. But the good news is that we started talking about it earlier than the shutdowns happened. So to that end, our program directors, Joel Chapman, our workforce development director, Frank Kubik from Food, started pivoting, started figuring out ways in which we could continue to service. So we've been able to still do our workforce training. We've had a number of graduating classes who've actually been able, in the midst of this pandemic, to get the full training, graduate, and place in jobs, have gainful employment now. But as well, we pivoted just like the grocery store. We decided we would do curbside pickup. So you drive up to Focus Help and we've already pre-packed your box and we just put it in your car, just the way we would if you would come into the facility and sort of shop for your food. And we do a ton of home deliveries, something that we did before but have expanded throughout this past year.
So with that, I do believe, one of the key elements of breaking the cycle is education and opportunity. How have you been able to service that and reach so many people? Because the one thing throughout this pandemic is we've all been forced to go online, but we know some of the neediest people within our community, they can barely put food on the table or lights. The internet, computers, right. That's a world away.
That's a world away. And that's so incredibly true. And that speaks to, again, sort of preparation beforehand. When we knew about this government shutdown or this shutdown, we started calling in our students to make sure they had devices, laptops or tablets. And so in ways in which we usually would provide stipends for transportation and some of the other things, we utilize that money to give them devices and to make sure they had internet service at home. We certainly had to do that with our instructors. We had to make sure they had faster internet. So we had to make sure that they were ready to go and instruct online. We worked with United Way throughout the fall of 2020 to make sure a lot of our seniors got tablets and instruction on how to use it so they could do telehealth with their physicians because they couldn't go in. But it really has forced us, in some ways, I will say, and it's forced us in a good way to look at ways in which we could provide the same type of services to all of our residents in ways that we had not thought about in the last 52 years because we never knew we would be here and need to do this way.
Always a silver lining if we just open our eyes to it. With that, can I ask you a little bit about the 2020 impact report? Yes. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, I think first of all, I'm incredibly proud of it. It just shows that, we managed to keep our doors open and keep servicing communities throughout this entire pandemic. Oftentimes people think of Focus Help as a Detroit organization, but we service, particularly in our food program, Oakland, Wayne, Washtenaw, and Macomb County. I always get it wrong, so I want to stop and think about it. So we service 4 counties. We really just wanted to make sure we could keep going. And that's what the impact report points out. We fed about 41,000 seniors prior to the pandemic hitting. We've seen an increase of about close to 3,000. And we've also been able throughout this last year to partner with a lot of organizations. So if you know anything about our food program, what we usually give out is non-perishable items. And so we really worked with Eastern Market and Forgotten Harvest, Gleaners to make sure we could include fresh fruits and vegetables in boxes because we knew people weren't able to supplement by going to the grocery store. A lot of our seniors weren't able to do that. So getting that in a box for them as well. Just again, our WDE program, continuing to train and get people into gainful employment. It's been my hope that anybody who comes through our doors and successfully completes one of our programs actually goes to work. I often say that, nobody wants their child or their grandchild to go off to Focus Hope to find a job and then come back home and end up on the couch. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our early education program and how we virtually tried to do home, sort of help parents with that homeschooling, with getting, going through a computer. Now, it's much more difficult for us because our children are up to 4 years old. So we're talking little kids, and their attention spans on computers are not that long. But being able to do a home visit and figuring out ways in which we could provide for our families diapers and wipes and formula has been huge throughout 2020. So our impact report is really to show everybody that Focus Hope is still here, and we're going to keep going as long as we have to, whether we're in these kind of circumstances or whether the circumstances hopefully change a little bit and let up a little bit in the future.
One of the things throughout the pandemic, you worry about the kids, where school was their safe spot. And you worry about them falling through the cracks throughout this pandemic.
That has been one of our biggest concerns, Ronnie. Our program director for Center for Children, which is what we call our early Head Start and our Head Start program, Wayman Hayes, has worried about that probably since the day we shut down, because we also know that, the stress of all of this for some parents, it makes for a more tenuous family situation, let's put it that way. And we don't have the opportunity to have our eyes on kids. Usually we see the kid every day. We see a child every day. And so we're able to identify if we think something is going on that shouldn't be going on. And so, again, a little bit, I would say, of us providing some things for our families was to be able to have our families come up and pick those things up, and hopefully we'd see a child, and even if it was through a car and socially distanced, we were able to at least kind of physically lay our eyes on that child. But we've had some episodes where we've seen some things going on that we've had to alert authorities about, and that's very scary. We tried to reopen in February. We did for a moment, but then spring break and people coming back, and so we're now shut down again. We're back to virtual for a little while again, just to see if we can sort of, we do our part to try to flatten the curve, or so to speak, and we'll see what happens. But as soon as we can get our children back in and make them safe and keep our staff safe, we'll do so.
We're speaking with the CEO of Focus Hope, and with that, Portia, you touched on it a little bit earlier in the conversation, is that you're not a Detroit organization. You're a Metro Detroit organization. How do we engage people in the suburbs to get involved and to understand that we are all one community?
We have a ton of people who come down and volunteer with us from all over, and we love and appreciate that. And certainly when we do our holiday giveaway, we have a ton of families who've come for years, whether they use Focus Hope or just knew of Focus Hope. We always have a lot of families that come, particularly from U of D High School, because U of D has been such a participant. They're young people when they're in school are participants. And then as they age up and they have their own families, they bring their families back down to volunteer, which is fantastic. There are other schools like that. Mercy High School is one that comes to mind as well. But, we always encourage that. We always encourage people to come and see, what we do there, but also, yes, to keep in mind that, we're servicing people from all over the community, that somebody who's your neighbor could be getting food assistance and you might not know it, but they might need a little help. And certainly as it relates to workforce, we're trying to encourage people. We just started a new project with DTE, a tree trimming program, training people to go up in those, I guess they call them buckets, and trim trees, but really good employment. And so we're getting people from all over to do that. So it's just really about getting that message out that we're here to help, and it's not regulated to you having a Detroit address.
Portia Roberson with us here on the MegaCast. She's the CEO for Focus Hope. And we know transportation, though, is really a big issue and can be so limiting for so many people.
Yeah, it's interesting right now, particularly because, on the one hand, we always gave stipends and tried to make sure we work with people around any barriers that existed as it relates to transportation. We had to do a little less of that in 2020 because people weren't going anywhere really. Particularly around our training and those kind of things. And so we'll still provide, as we see people going off to jobs, we'll still try to help them work out what they need to do in terms of getting there. With our truck driving training program, say that fast 4 times, we, make sure that people come to us for 4 weeks, and then we assist with getting them to our truck driving school, which is located in Sterling Heights, for the additional 4 weeks of actual truck driving. I wish I could do truck driving on Oakman Boulevard, but it can't really happen. So they have to go to a school to actually learn to physically be in the truck. And we'll continue to support them in that way. One of the things that's so important about our workforce development program in particular is that we always say, once you're part of the Focus Hope family, you're always a part of that. So once you go off to employment, you don't end your relationship with Focus Hope. You have a financial coach, you have a coach, period, that helps you with certain barriers that may come up, whether that's childcare, transportation, other issues that we know. We can give you the greatest employee in the world. But as I like to say, if your child is sick for a couple of days and you can't get to work and you don't have good, solid childcare, you're not going to keep coming to work. So we'll work with students and anyone who needs the additional help. And certainly with our food program, we are more than willing to bring it to you. We will do the home delivery. You do not have to come to Focus Hope if you don't have the transportation to come to get the supplemental food box.
So with that, Portia, your Focus Hope is so well known in the organization, but what are your needs right now that the public can help you with?
Volunteers. We always need volunteers. Packing those food boxes. Of course, as I mentioned, when the pandemic hit, we had to go to having all the boxes pre-packed. Typically, we would pack boxes, or people would actually come in and shop. They would pick their own stuff that they wanted in their box. We'd have some variety and they could pick it. We can't do that anymore. We can't have people in sort of a food store. So we have to pre-pack all the boxes. And as you might imagine, when so many companies shut down or people went virtual, they didn't have their corporate service day. So where we used to have a certain group that would come in on any given day or week or month because a part of their own service, we don't have that anymore. So we're always looking for volunteers. You can go online, focushope.edu, and you can sign up right on there with a team. We do the social distance. We require you wear a mask. We've had hand washing stations and hand sanitizer. So you're not in jeopardy from, coming down to volunteer. But the more boxes we have packed, the more we can make sure that everybody gets what they need.
Because we know the pandemic doesn't stop the need, and
Yes.
increases the need. And so many people need help right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people all the time the need was there before the pandemic hit, and we just saw people who, again, didn't traditionally need that help, that needed it for the first time. And we want to make sure we're there to service folks. I will say this. I think that what we found is during this time, people are more aware of what nonprofits do. Nonprofits like Focus Hope and so many others, that we had to step into a lot of gaps that, government had to work on some other things, right? They had to work on, testing and vaccinations and some of those kind of things. And a lot of the nonprofits in the Metro Detroit area had to step into those gaps and help people with the food that they needed, help them with, as I said, for our children, for our families, our diapers and wipes and formula and all the kind of things that people don't anticipate needing, because typically their kids were with us for 8 hours a day and they aren't anymore. So we'll continue to do that kind of work.
So with that, is there anything you have going on that you want the public to know before we say goodbye to you?
Well, we're always, we're a nonprofit, so I would be remiss if I didn't say we always will be looking for donations and asking for donations. But I think the most important thing that I wanted to get out, and certainly what came out of the impact report, is, again, that we've been doing this work. We never missed a day. I'm proud to say we didn't lay off anybody during the pandemic. We kept all of our workers because we needed them, but we needed them not because it's not that I'm proud because we didn't lay off anybody. That's a plus, and I'm happy for our staff. But I'm equally happy because it meant we could serve as many residents, as many citizens as needed us. And we're going to continue to kind of do that work and make sure we can stand in those gaps where people need us. And, to say, everybody needs help sometime, and there is no shame in asking for that help, no shame in needing that help. And so I just want people to know that when they come to Focus Hope, we're going to, give them the help that they need and make sure that they can carry themselves through whatever's coming next for all of us. And hopefully it means that we're going to be able to get out this summer and come back down and shop in some of our food stores. But if not, we'll be there to stand in the gaps of what they need.
Well, you've made a difference in so many lives. The organization has, and the volunteers and your staff. You're listening to 89.3 WBLD, WBFH 88.1. So we want to say thank you again. And please extend our gratitude to your staff and your team. I know it's been a hard year for all of you as well.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you all having me on to talk about Focus Hope. I always appreciate it.